Okay, we're back with another diagram to explain the awakening process. And this is kind of a fun one, the creation of perception. And what I've done here is this is a rough mock-up of a nicer picture I drew, which was inspired by the visual artists at NASA who created that diagram showing the Big Bang and the creation of the universe, and showing the the order in which the universe has been unfolding and creating itself, and the time scale there. And there is something analogous in the way we can conceive of the mind, the creation of the mind, which is coincidental or not. And let me go through this and explain what I mean. So the theme of this is essentially to understand our mind is creating and deconstructing our perception of reality all the time. And there is a kind of order in that perceptual fabrication process that can be tracked. And one thing we might think of what we're doing in meditation is being able to peer into earlier and earlier mind moments. So, just as astronomers, when they peer out into space, they are looking backwards in time towards the Big Bang because it takes time for the light to reach us. And so they're seeing earlier moments in the creation process. Well, there's something we can do in meditation here and training our perceptive faculties to notice earlier and earlier moments in the creation of our perception leading up to, the very ordinary, mundane thinking world of self and objects and 3D hardened structures and these things. So when we start out, all of this is obscured. All of these earlier mind moments are not available to be recognized because uh, our mind starts with things being phenomenally opaque to us. So, for most people, when they start to meditate and they close their eyes, they're just bombarded by thoughts, and there's nothing but the thoughts, seemingly. They can't see through their thoughts. But then there is this process as we gain more and more insight into emptiness. This becomes phenomenally transparent so that we can see the whole creation process. So, one way I would describe my moment to moment experience is even with there being, I can see a world here, and even if I'm thinking and there can be modeling about the character of Roger and all that good stuff, it's all transparent. And so these earlier stages in perception are still available, are still clear to me. And this is where you get like the source is in everything. In the original photo, I wrote source. I didn't write anything here for a good reason. And I'll get into that about not trying to make a thing out of nothing or a ground out of the groundlessness. But I'll get into that. So uh, then the question becomes is like, how do we recognize the earlier mind moments? So this can be done in a couple of ways. One way is to stabilize the mind and kind of power down all of this content to then abide and sort of reach a stable state of mind at each level of resolution or level of fabrication or stage. And this actually tracks quite nicely with the jhanas. So, um, with the jhanas, what we might be doing is uh, you need to you need to reach like a you need to find a clear point, right? So you're pointing your telescope of attention and concentration, finding an empty space, an empty location in space time when your mind is not populated with lots of thoughts, and you're free from the hindrances, and you're not bombarded with um, ardent emotions or tight constrictions in the body. And you are going to find a kind of through line here in order to uh, gradually, slowly defabricate all this content, and then arrive at. So essentially, here we've got a point in the original NASA photo. This is the moment in creation and time when like the stars are coming online, and I my model here, I've tracked it with this sort of boundless consciousness realm. I think it was Dogen who tried to argue that like consciousness is literally light or photons. Photons are consciousness. Uh, anyway, another point. So with Jhana, we're gonna uh, defabricate all of this and try to rest the mind at a particular level of fabrication. So, um, this will be at this point here. This is like J1, like J1 to J3, Jhana 1 to Jhana 3 is kind of still playing with this form and this content. Then sort of noticing this space here, right, where it's not the particular objects or sensations, is going to be like Jhana 4 territory. But then we get into the boundless space, Jhana 5, Jhana 6, boundless consciousness, Jhana 6, and this is the realm of thingness, of kind of infinite thingness. In my model here, I'm splitting it up into sort of two versions. There's like a personal version and an impersonal version of thinginess or the consciousness. We can personify it or anthropomorphize it in a way, and that's where you get the more the I am stage. If you identify with this, and where the love can come from, and all this stuff. But then there's kind of an impersonal version of thinginess, where just take it as an object. But what's on the other side of thinginess is no thingness or no thinginess, Jhana 7, and then after the no thinginess, neither perception nor non-perception, Jhana 8, and then cessation here. So let me say a bit more. So Jhana is about trying, we're not putting attention on this stuff so that this stuff doesn't fabricate in the mind, and we stabilize this particular realm. And there's this order of fabrication which tracks very nicely. The thing about Jhana, though, is you may get into each one of these levels of perception, and you may even have a cessation, right? This is where the whole ground falls out, consciousness falls out. But when you come out of the jhanas, then this whole thing fabricates again, and you're back into thinking, feeling mode of being. But it may still be phenomenally opaque, as you don't continue to retain the awareness of these earlier mind moments, right? Unless you do the insight practice as well. We train in emptiness to see earlier on. So let me explain this less in a jhana type way, now more in a ongoing uh, insight sort of route. So um, as we start out again, people maybe um, uh, this stuff is clouded by the earlier stuff, and what people are identifying, right, might be their thoughts or something like this, and they see that as like, no, that's what my mind is made of. Linguistic symbolic thought in particular. Um, then there's this process of seeing the emptiness and arriving at different levels of fabrication. And one is tempted to say they keep finding their true self or the real ground of being or what their essence is. And what I'm going to call people's um, most sort of earliest, their perceived ground, that which they have not yet seen the emptiness of or is not yet phenomenally transparent to them, wherever they're arriving and what seems to still be phenomenally opaque to them, or seems to be their ground or their center. I'm calling it the axial aspect of their mind, and this is the level at which everything else seems to revolve around, the ultimate kind of pivot, fulcrum point, and it may not be perceived as like a hardened point, hardened structure, but it seems like, oh, um, that is my true self, my true source, and uh, even if they're paying attention to other stuff, that is the aspect which seems to continue to shine through until eventually the axial aspect lands on nothing, not even nothingness. And it's not an infinite process. So, uh, listen to people talk when they're making sense of their own experience, or um, listen to yourself, and observing yourself. What seems to be your perceived ground of being? Is it a sense of a infinite consciousness, an isness, nothingness, or an emptiness? But this kind of nothingness is still reified as an actual kind of thingness, but you may be blind to that, not recognize. And then once you even get past nothingness, then and then what would be the equivalent of Jhana 8 if it's stabilized, or if you just are able to continually be able to see it, even despite the stuff being formed and it's phenomenally transparent. I call it this sort of proto-qualia level. Technically, it's still qualia, so it's still of experience, but it's without metacognition at this point. So this really is the quantum foam realm of of consciousness, and when you're in it, you don't know that you're in it. It's only afterwards that you come out of it that um, you can use the window of your short-term memory to kind of harken back and reflect and go, oh yeah, there was kind of a something something going on there. But if one's axial aspect is up to this point, uh, this is when the knowing really falls away, and we're gonna talk in terms of neither this nor that. So the eighth jhana is neither neither perception nor non-perception, right? But there's still this sort of tempt. It's still like subtle, slight conditioning where we're tempted to we recognize it's not really a thing or nothing, but we're tempted to still talk about something there in a way until we let go of even that. And in my original diagram, I wrote source here. Uh, this is when we get to, we could call it like, yeah, nibbana, the nibbanic element, nirvana, recognizing that even consciousness is dependently arising, and all of this shuts out, lights off. But then once the axial aspect has gone through and through, all of this phenomenally transparent. Exactly, it's it's ineffable. You know, there's no ground to talk about. There's no central thing that is holding up everything else. It's all dependent on the on everything else, and leave it at that. You'll see when you get there, when you know, and you can hear it in other people. So um, I think this is just kind of a cool way to make sense of the meditative process. And then obviously, even once this is fully transparent, there is all the integration that needs to happen, and great sort of parts work. We take all your conditionings and thoughts and feelings and all these things and body sensations and integrate it into the loving awareness of the self and all that great stuff. And um, yeah, fun diagram. Uh, limits to these. Uh, there's limits to these always already, but it's a bit of fun. And yeah, this is where I talk about noticings per second. Like, it makes a difference if we think about it. This creation in this order, you can see how you would need ridiculously fast noticings per second to be able to begin to notice these mind moments, let alone stabilize fabrication of the mind at a particular level of resolution. So uh, I'll leave it at that, but I hope that is edifying, elucidating, clarifying, and thank you very much.